We should be voting in the recall right now. The only reason that we're not is that this legislature passed a new law a few years ago overhauling the recall process to make it take a lot longer. Now, everyone knew at the time that it was a sham, and it was designed solely to try to save a sitting state senator, Josh Newman, who was then facing a recall. Now, I will say this about Senator Newman, to his credit. At the time, he declined to be directly complicit in the scheme being perpetrated on his behalf. In 2017, when that bill was under consideration, he rose on the floor of the Senate and said this. He said, "Now let me point out, for the avoidance of doubt here, that I am not the author of these provisions, nor did I request their inclusion, and I will be abstaining from voting on this measure today." Senator Newman seemed to recognize that he should not be a judge in his own cause, that if the dirty deed was to be done, then at least his fingerprints shouldn't be on it. That bare minimum level of decency exhibited by Senator Josh Newman is way too much to ask of Governor Gavin Newsom. This trailer bill was negotiated by his administration. Apparently, his own campaign had a hand in it, as they've refused multiple requests for comment by the Associated Press. And the bill will only take effect when the governor signs it. So we have the unprecedented circumstance where Governor Gavin Newsom, with the stroke of a pen, will be changing California law in order to try to beat back his own recall. We know the purpose of this bill because the governor's main spokesman on the issue, the Senator for Orinda, has said so directly. He said, best opportunity to beat this reckless recall of Gavin Newsom is to have an early election. He said Gavin Newsom should fight the battle on his terms. He said he should strike while his favorables are strong enough. The senator went on television and said, in my calculation, there's a lot of unknowns out there that could change the positive environment that we've seen on his behalf. He continued, that drives my political advice, that an election sooner under the law would be a better circumstance for him. But the senator got ahead of himself because it turns out that the law, that is the corrupt one passed in 2017, didn't allow for the election to happen as early as he's suggesting. So the governor's team said, no problem, we'll just change the law in order to have the election when we think it'll give us the best chance to win. It is not hyperbole to say this is qualitatively the same thing that happens in corrupt, sham democracies the world over. Those in power use their power to make sure they don't lose their power. There are international election observers, organizations, specifically devoted to ferreting out this type of chicanery. For example, the United States Center on Human Rights, in its guidelines, says that each time elections are scheduled, the dates set out in the electoral calendar for each phase of the process must allow adequate time for effective campaigning and public information efforts, for voters to inform themselves, and for the necessary administrative, legal training, and logistic arrangements to be made. The ACE Electoral Knowledge Network says that it is important that the mechanisms of the electoral system be as transparent as possible and known to both voters and political parties and candidates well in advance in order to avoid confusion and distrust in the results they produce at elections. The European Commission for Democracy Through Law distinguishes countries where the electoral framework is stable and necessary amendments are adopted well ahead of the next election from other states where significant changes to the election legislation occur frequently and late, and in some cases a few months prior to elections in a hasty and non-inclusive way. But really, this appeal to international human rights organizations is unnecessary. Every child knows the word for changing the rules in the middle of the game.
30 seconds, Mr. Kiley.
It's cheating. And the conclusion is inescapable that Gavin Newsom is cheating in the recall, and this legislature is his willing accomplice. Now, we don't yet know if this scheme will work. But right now, we're seeing an extraordinary citizens movement, millions of people fighting to end the abject corruption at this Capitol. And when your response is to be even more corrupt, it's not a sustainable strategy. But at the end of the day, I am confident that the will of the people and the strength of our civic institutions will win out, and this era of decline and failure will be reversed, and a new era of decency and integrity and service in California can begin.